Welcome back to our ValueByte series, and today we are excited to be joined by Cheryl, and we are going to get to chat all things business performance checkup. But before we dive in, Cheryl, tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and how you help business owners.
Yeah, of course. So it's great to be here. And just by way of introduction, I have a consulting company and I provide fractional CFO and strategic advisory consulting to startups and small businesses. So I work with founding teams, founders, leadership teams, and help them think about their business primarily from the financial perspective, but also from the overall perspective. What do they need to do to grow their business, if they're raising money, if they need to get loans, if they just want to grow their product set and their team. What are the right ways to think about that? How do we kind of structure things in a way that's going to help them achieve their goals?
That's awesome. And I love that your focus is on those smaller businesses, the startups, because I think that our conversation today is so important for them. And I know at least Randy and I find that they're not necessarily doing these things like they should. So let's start out with elaborating on what the significance is of conducting a mid-year performance checkup, what that even means, and then what are those benefits that a small business or a startup can expect to see from doing those kind of check-ins.
Yeah, of course. So hopefully they have sat down at the beginning of the year or the end of the previous year and really created a plan for the year, right? What your goals are, what you want to achieve from customer growth, revenue goals, maybe social media impressions, or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And at mid-year, it's a great time to reflect back and see, how did the first half of the year go? Did you achieve the goals that you wanted to get to? And also, did anything happen that is going to make you rethink your goals? So, we don't have a crystal ball, right? We can't, I always have a hard time setting goals that are a year out, or, sometimes people want to go 3 and 5 years out. I'm like, I don't know, like the world's going to change so much between now and then. We don't know what's going to happen and what's going to work and what's not going to work. So it's not to make sure that you're sticking to those goals that you decided in January, but it's to make sure that you know where you are and can make decisions if you want to pivot.
I think oftentimes thinking about that mid-year check-in can feel so overwhelming. I know for us, we do more quarterly check-ins kind of in our world, but now I'm thinking we probably should make our Q2 check-in more formal and like a true mid-year check-in. So I'm feeling a little bit inspired. So with that in mind, because there are so many variables and perhaps even so many goals. So like even in our end with marketing, we have, 3 to 5 marketing goals, and there might be some other goals that happen over in the sales arena or operations or whatever that looks like for the business. So what would you say in your experience would be the top maybe 3 components that should always be included in that comprehensive mid-year review? I mean, there might be some things that are unique to a business, but these are the core competency 3 things you must include when you sit down mid-year. And I'm asking for a friend, not for myself, right?
Well, because I come from the finance lens, of course, I'm going to say the most important things are looking at your revenue and then looking at your expenses, right? And so you want to make sure that your revenue is tracking the way you want it to go. But if your revenue grows, like say you double revenue and you triple your expenses, you still are not any better off, right? And so you can't just look at one side of the coin. You have to look at both of those together. And then, any business that has a product or service that you're putting out into the market, I think looking at your customer experience and what are your customers looking for, and making sure that what it is that you're delivering to them is actually what they need. And sometimes you have to kind of shift your thinking on that a little bit to find that fit, that product market customer fit, so that you can continue to grow your business.
I think just even the primary example of revenue expenses is such a good reminder, because it's exciting to think about the revenue. I mean, we all want growth,
Mhm.
but more than revenue, we want profit.
Mhm.
And if we're not looking at hey, yeah, you doubled revenue, but you tripled expenses, then we're not really getting that good lens. And I think that's such like a very like quick way to see that the benefit of doing the mid-year check-in. So I definitely like that example as such a practical application.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So obviously that's kind of something that applies to everyone, because
Yeah.
everyone should have some profit, or hopefully if they got revenue, they got expenses. But what are some ways that businesses can tailor this performance check-in to align with either their unique goals or maybe their industry, or you mentioned like market conditions? What are some things that either you do with your clients or that you would recommend that clients do to kind of tailor that process more specifically to them?
Yeah, so I think any business can look at the competitive landscape in their market and understand what their margins should be. So you might have a business that makes a product, right? And so you're going to have a lot of cost of goods sold. And so your gross margin is going to be very different than if you had, for example, a software business or professional services business where your expenses are sort of categorized a little bit differently. And so really understanding what the margins for your business type, your industry are, can be really helpful to keep you on track. And then also look at how your competitors are growing. So when you're looking at your growth goals, are they realistic? Are you looking to grow in a way that is sort of outsized for the market? And so it always feels like you're a little bit kind of behind the 8 ball, or are you being, totally upfront with this is a realistic growth goal, and kind of set that by your competitors in your market and thinking about, this is the one thing that I often talk to my clients about is what is the unique thing that you are bringing to your industry or to your customers? Like, what is it that sets you apart from everybody else? And of course, there are going to be commodities businesses, but if you can really clearly describe what that unique aspect of your company is, I think that will help drive where you should be focusing on your goals.
I think that's such a great reminder of having that balance of, yes, you want to have like those benchmarks, the industry standards that you're checking in with, but then also looking at that lens of like, what is your unique differentiator and how are you doing in regards to that? So I think that is a great balance of kind of those two tiers in a way. What would you say, Cheryl, are some of the common pitfalls or maybe the business owners that get those blinders on? We have those blind spots that as business owners and as organizations that you've found that tend to be common when they're conducting that mid-year performance review. What are some of those most common pitfalls and how do you think that they can mitigate those?
Yeah, so I think sometimes, people might sign up for services or get involved in like recurring projects that they have these monthly payments for, right? So I mean, we all know that like, signing up for subscriptions on our iPhone, right? And then you get charged all the time for it and you don't even realize it, right? Well, I think
It's never happened to any of us. Yeah.
I know. Definitely make sure that there's nothing like that going on in your business. Like you have to be really mindful of where you're spending your money. And understanding, making sure that those things, maybe when you signed up for it, it was providing you a lot of value, but you're not using it anymore. So can you, scale back on those sorts of charges? I think the other thing is sort of not really understanding what your customer is looking for. And so you're, trying to do something because you think it's the right thing. You're trying to articulate your service or your product in a certain way because you think it's the right thing. But if you're not listening to your customers, and understanding how it's working for them or how it's not working for them, then you won't be able to really shape the growth of your business in a way that is going to be productive. So I think it's really like not being too inwardly focused, but, picking up your head, looking out around you. And I think, a huge pitfall is just not taking time to reflect on all of this stuff, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
maybe not, you might have done your budget at the beginning of the year with your CFO or your controller, and then you put it on the shelf and you never look at it again. Well, what good does that do? You spent a whole lot of time, you invested in it, you had a lot of thought behind it. And if you're not actually picking it up and looking at it on a regular basis, it wasn't worth that time. And so I think just knowing that you can do this sort of a mid-year check-in and really go back to all of your goals that you set out and understand how far you've come is a huge way to get over these pitfalls.
I love that. And I could go on and on for days with you on the getting your head up and looking at what do your customers want and not getting so stuck in what you want. That's a big pet peeve of mine.
Mhm.
But to get us back on track before I take us off on that tangent, maybe we'll have to do another value bites just on that. But from your perspective, if we think back to kind of how are you analyzing the business? How are you performing this check-in? What role do things like data analytics, KPIs, those data points that we can see about the business, what role do they play in assessing that business performance during this mid-year check-in?
So I heard this phrase a long time ago, and I don't really know where to attribute it to, but it's what gets measured gets managed, right?
Yeah.
And so I am a big proponent of data behind everything, because that way you can see what's going on. The data doesn't lie. The data is not emotional, right? It will tell you what's working and what's not working. And so I think that the data really plays a big role. And for example, one of the things that I'm doing with one of my clients right now is they didn't have any sort of KPI or measurement when I started working with them last year. And we went through this exercise, and now we have, a handful of KPIs that we look at the company level. And then we also are starting now to break it down into each of the different teams, right? The business development team, the delivery team, and say, okay, so we might look at these 3 KPIs up here with the CEO and the leadership team. That doesn't mean those are the only KPIs that you're looking at for the business. How are you and your teams layering up your KPIs? Like, you should have your own dashboard that sort of feeds into those numbers on the CEO level KPI sheet. And really creating this environment of, let's start measuring what's going on. Let's start looking at our data so that we can make decisions based on that data.
Absolutely. I mean, we live in a world where you really can measure just about anything, especially if you plan properly and you're being strategic and you're not being reactive. And I know from a data standpoint, you're speaking our language. We build marketing dashboards for any of our clients when they come on. That's one of our kind of foundational things to really allow the business owner to get out of their own way, in a sense of not looking at some of the data that we think isn't true conversion-based data, and allow them to focus on that high level. What's moving you towards your vision? What do you really need to be looking at as an owner? And what does need to be on maybe a secondary dashboard for your team leads that they need to be diving into? So really love the dashboard language and the data language. So
well,
I think,
and just one more thought on that. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but as you were speaking, I was thinking about this, like the first month or two that you do the dashboard, like, it's not that interesting, right? And so you've done all this work, and then everybody's like, oh, this is what it is. But that's where the consistency and the perseverance comes in, right? If you can stick with it after 6 months, 9 months, like, that's where you're going to start to see the trends, and you're going to start to understand what's going on. And you're going to be able to react quickly to something that happens in the business when you see a KPI that sort of moves out of context with how it's been moving the last several months.
well, and I can imagine too, the first year that you do your mid-year performance check-in after you've had that dashboard going for a year, that's a lot more exciting too, to be able to go into, look at that data and put something to use, which kind of brings me to my next question, which is, if nothing else, hopefully someone could take from this a great reminder to go ahead and get on the calendar your mid-year performance review. Now's a great time to go ahead and time block it out, make sure everybody's ready, because we get busy and we just don't put it on the calendar. I think that happens a lot. But once we do that, once we sit down, once our clients take the time to set a time for that mid-year performance evaluation, what are some things that they can do to turn that into actionable strategies and initiatives for the last 2 quarters of the year?
Well, I think it goes back to the goals that you set at the beginning of the year, right? And you have these high level goals, and you have to decide if those goals are going to continue through the second half of the year, or if you need to reshape them a little bit based on what you've learned in the first half of the year. And then once you have those goals, it's really breaking it down into smaller steps, right? What are you going to do next month, next week, tomorrow? And making sure that they're manageable activities, manageable tasks, so that you can progress toward that. If you just leave it at the high level goal perspective, right? I want to make, $1 million this year. You're not going to make $1 million because you haven't figured out, well, what do I have to do to make $1 million? Well, I have to have X number of clients, and I have to be able to bill each client, Y dollars. And, how do we kind of come backward from that so that there are those tangible steps that you can take?
I love that. The breaking it down, that is so our language. We focus so much on that in our marketing strategies, because it's one thing to come in and say, you need to do these 5 things to meet your goals. It's a whole other thing to say, here's what you have to do every single month to get to those goals. And that's something that I think so many businesses miss. They just focus on that high level, and then they have no idea how to actually do the work in the weeds.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Cheryl, so much for joining us today. This has been an awesome conversation. I'm so excited now to get ready for our mid-year review.
Absolutely.
If people want to connect with you, learn more about how you can help them in their business, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram, Cheryl A. Heller. And you can also download, I have a document that goes through 30 key financial terms that you need. So if you go to 30terms.com, that will lead you to that page, and you can put in your email and it will get sent to you.
What a great resource. Thanks for sharing that, Cheryl. And we'll look forward to hopefully chatting with you again soon.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.